Hello once again, and today we're taking another look at the man of the hour, Antoons. Within my last video, I considered him a liar, a flip-flopper, and kind of a bad person. However, after a recent video of his, some people have been questioning me. There have also been a few recent events taking place that have gotten people to think about Antoons quite a bit more. Some of those events can include falsely striking down videos, getting suspended from Twitter, and even more lying on his part. In the midst of all of that happening, I actually got in contact with Anton himself, and interviewed him for this very video. There's a lot to cover, so let's just stop. And if you don't mind, please subscribe so that I don't have to feel dead inside whenever I say something like that. YouTuber Daft previously interviewed Anton on his channel, but about a month after Daft's video came out, Anton created a 30-minute defense called Daft Bed, and for those who know Daft past, when people make responses to him after he's criticized them, it usually does not go very well, but more into that later. Looking at Anton's video as a whole, do I think it was a good response? No, not really. Besides the fact that he didn't really have to respond, the video itself starts out trying to make Daft look like the villain. But it's just a drawing, you might say. Well, from what I learned with color theory, Anton portrays Daft with a black jacket while he wears a lighter one to signify which character you want to root for, and for a small note, he gives Daft a pink shirt as to make it seem like he's more feminine. You might wonder why would he do that, but knowing what groups Anton makes fun of, you'll see why later. Oh, my jacket? Yeah, I'm the enemy of my own video, what of it? Moving past that, the video is a direct response to certain things that Daft shows in his video. Such things include how Anton makes fun of the LGBT community, as well as other races. Anton paints Daft as sort of an unfair person, claiming that he takes his comics out of context, despite Daft showing nearly all of them in his video, pointing specifically to comics making fun of Christians, gamers, and neckbeards as a way to show he pokes fun at everyone. Not really a good defense for his comics, where he portrays the LGBT community as accepting pedos and the suicide rate of trans people, but Anton was never really good at pivoting away from actual points. After this claim, he goes on to talk about people believing his character Mr. Sneaks is black and uses a representation for black characters, stating that Mr. Sneaks is not human and that he also has a black character in his comics. However, there's this thing called racial coding. To explain, it's essentially when you have a character that shares aspects with a certain minority and expressing hints that that character is of that denomination, though it isn't outright stated. For example, the infamous crows in Dumbo. They're black animals that have stereotypically black accents and do stereotypically black things for the time. It's obvious what they represent, but to Anton, he'll call you out for seeing race to pivot from his works. In fact, one of his comics shows two opposing lives involving his characters Mr. Freaks and Mr. Sneaks. Mr. Freaks has parents that watch after him, give him help, and allow him to become successful. Mr. Sneaks has parents that leave him alone and allow him to look at porn, smoke, and eventually become an amalgamation of various ideologies that Anton doesn't like. Mr. Sneaks also doesn't have a father figure, a major racial stereotype, so I'm glad Anton was able to shove in as much racism as he could. In this case, it has nothing to do with Mr. Sneaks tricking anyone. This is just their lives, and it's easy to see how this comic is race-coded in a bad way. This comic also casts a bad shadow on the rest of Anton's work, no matter what excuse he uses to try and justify the others. He also claims Daft never shows the black character in his video, but he clearly does. Oh, and here's a tweet explicitly saying Mr. Sneaks is black. Oops, Anton, I think you left out a little context for someone who cares so much about it. While watching Anton's response, which mainly focuses on tracing rather than race, I got the feeling that Anton never understood the point of Daft's original video. Within it, Anton tries to say that his comics are just jokes, noting that he has friends from all walks of life. That's right, he tried to pull the "I have a minority friend" card as he says slurs on Twitter. Charming. Not even just that, as it's been shown that he often calls people slurs behind their backs as well. He claims that he's allowed to say these slurs because his friends say it's okay, but after speaking with the people he called slurs, such as Sweet Beans and Squirrely Jack, they think that is not the case. They never gave him permission to call them these things. Wait, hold on. Does Anton actually believe the N-word pass is real? How stupid is he? Jesus Christ. But this leads back into Daft's original video. Despite it being called Racist Tracer, it was never really about that. His main point was to try and explain how he believed Anton had been indoctrinated into the community, as seen by his friends Mr. Pumpkinface, who is a father, and Stone Toss, egging him on to be a bit more hateful. But name a moment in the video where Daft actually calls Anton racist outright. You might point to the end, but in that moment, he says he wouldn't put it past people to think Anton was that based on his public persona. He may act nice or have a different set of beliefs regarding his views off of Twitter, but that account is still linked with his name. It's easy to think based on his comics that he's simply a racist tracer, and if Anton doesn't want to have that perception, he should try and have his views reflected on his Twitter rather than those of others. On the tracing part of his response, Anton is that. He traces and spends a majority of the video justifying his tracings. Everything from calling out other people to even showing that famous artists have done it. You'd think I'd get more into this, however, this is just just a pivot to make himself look smart. Instead, we'll focus on Meat Canyon, a figure he calls out heavily in the video. Despite Meat Canyon being a collective of artists, Anton tries to point out Daft's hypocrisy in not showing this in his video with Meat Canyon. That could be because the last trace was from 7 months ago, it was one of Meat Canyon's artists that had possibly been fired now, or Daft just spoke to him privately. Yeah, not impressive stuff. Speaking of gotchas and tracing, although Anton claims he didn't try to expose Daft on Twitter for his past, watching his video, Anton tries to pretend that Daft was hiding his past as a tracer, despite him talking about it on Twitter, live streams, and even in videos here and there. I know Anton likes to bully or argue with minors, but at this point he's a time-traveling bully, as these are from 5 or 6 years ago when Daft was a teen. He proceeds to call Daft a failed artist because he doesn't have any recent drawings. Looking at Google, well, yeah, he does. Great research, Anton, but why would Anton think Daft was hiding his past? Well, Daft never showed him his drawings, but in the screenshot that Anton provides, Daft literally said you can check his Twitter. Amazing journalism, Anton. Another thing he tries to claim is that Daft got rid of the old content because he wanted to be friends with Meat Canyon. However, anyone who follows Daft's channel would know that he's been doing this since 2019 and 2018, long before he ever even spoke to Meat Canyon. So what do we have with Anton's video? Literally a bunch of assumptions from a guy who likes that word a little too much and claims that Daft wants to fuel drama, with Anton constantly tweeting about how bad of a person Daft is while he makes Family Guy memes and other videos. Clearly one of them hasn't moved on. You could point out when Daft updates his audience about Anton's striking videos, but that's more so a warning in case his video goes down because his fans would want to ask him about it. One of the best videos made on Daft was made by Quinn Curio, and not to rub it in, but her video got a hell of a lot more attention than his ever will, and in the end, Quinn and Daft became friends. He never tried to take down her video, unlike Anton who likes to do it daily, especially if you use 15 seconds of his video. Whoa, calm down, Anton. Are you gonna strike mine down just because I don't agree with you? The last part of Anton's video focuses on Puppy-chan claiming the screenshots Daft found are out of context. Within them, you can see how Anton was only really making peace because she has a massive following. He also certainly holds some ill will towards her, since in his likes for his new Twitter, one of them was for a response saying Puppy-chan should be hit by a bus. Worst part of Anton bringing this up is that he never actually gives context, only just proving these screenshots are in fact real. I got a chance to ask about them again in my interview, which I'll go into later, but let's circle back to him taking down people's videos. First, let me tell you about Izzy's. Izzy's is another YouTuber who decided to cover Anton in a video just as I did. I don't agree with everything she said in the video, such as her directly calling Anton a predator at the time, but if nothing else, it was a popular video. On Twitter, how do you think Anton would respond? Preferably, it would have been best for him to not speak at all, but if he was going to respond, maybe he'd say that the claims are untrue, that he doesn't agree with it, or calls them a map out of nowhere. You might be wondering how he got to such a conclusion. First, he said it was because he got a tip from an anonymous source, in which case he did no fact-checking. He then further elaborated when I asked him about it in our interview, saying, "I was told she defends all LGBT groups, which includes maps." So his reason to believe she's a map is that she supports the LGBT community. Wait, Anton, I thought you said your friends were diverse people in the community. Doesn't that make you a map too, based on your logic? Anyway, that means he believes maps are considered a part of the LGBT community, despite the fact that it explicitly tries to exclude them and doesn't like them claiming to be part of it. When I told him this, he said, 40% of maps are in the LGBT community, and that doesn't disprove my claim at all. Eventually he mentions that he supposedly worked things out with her and made a follow-up tweet, and gives another reason that it's because she's asexual. His reasoning being that maps hide their sexuality so they can pretend to be asexual? Also, noting the out-of-context DMs, he did mention people were accusing him of being a pedo, so this could just be a tactic to divert attention away from that. Basically, his logic is highly flawed and he had no reason to say what he did, but at least he made a follow-up tweet, right? It's not the one you think I'm referring to, though. Yes, he did make a follow-up tweet in which he doubles down and calls her a map because she made a thread. Okay, we're dealing with an Einstein over here, noting that he said she was trying to stir up drama and that he wanted to fight back. You know, Anton is 31 and he's arguing with an 18-year-old on Twitter. Does anybody else see this as kind of sad? I hope you do, because his defense for tweeting back at her was, "But she did stuff too." This reminds me of the time when I said he doesn't have to respond, or maybe that just hurts his ego so he has to win the fight. I even told him, you can be the bigger person instead of doing the same as them. His response? "I'm tired of doing that. These people need to be taught the hard way." He goes on to explain, "I'm keeping this tweet as a reminder that she can also get caught in a misunderstanding. After all, she made 2 videos on me," it was actually just 1, "without an interview. So just like her assumptions, I assumed that she was a map on little evidence. I think that's fair. Maybe I'm dealing with a child, and that's coming from me, a minor. He did a similar thing with Puppy-chan by convincing her to allow him to keep up his video where he animated her shooting blood. It's a power move. He wants to assert dominance by making others apologize for things and keep up his shit to make it seem more like he's in the right. He only acts nice to you if you follow his directions, and the moment you don't agree, he calls you a liar and a drama glutton. Speaking of Puppy-chan, he claimed that he would have phrased some of the bits in the screenshots better as they don't have the word could in Estonia. An interesting point I was willing to buy until I was reminded he speaks 6 languages. He pulled the same thing when I said Puppy-chan could easily fake her age with Ko-Fi, as he said in Estonian culture that doesn't work. Remember, he's been around the world and stayed in many places. It seems at least highly unlikely he wouldn't know about one culture where faking your age or signing up with your parents for payment methods isn't a thing. He also grew up with Western culture, so he would definitely know something about this. He also claimed he didn't care about her age, but when I brought up tweets and showed that he clearly did, he reiterated by saying, I guess I cared back then, and I don't even know what realm I'm living in anymore with that kind of response. Let's go out on a limb and say Antoons didn't mean to dox or backstab Puppy-chan in any way. Even removing all of that, it's hardly the main issue now. Back to Izzy's video, Anton struck it down. As of writing, he found a way to get the video taken down for copyright infringement. It's honestly hilarious and ironic that he would try to get the video taken down for copyright infringement of all things. Like, does he not see the irony in that? Oh well, yeah, this is a false claim as he admits in a DM with a Twitter user. As much as Anton claims other people are triggered, snowflakes, or even weak, it's really pathetic that his ego is so hurt by videos that he has to falsely take them down. What a sad 31-year-old man. Also, noting this is one of the scummiest things you can do on YouTube, comparing him to Daft, he never took down re-uploads of his old Jaden video because it literally didn't affect him. But to Anton, he needs to control the flow of information. I asked him about why he took down the video, and a reason he gave was that Izzy breached their truces by taking down her pinned comment explaining everything. When asked about it, she showed him it was still up 5 hours before Anton took down the video, but it turns out it was unpinned. The reason is that Izzy did as Anton asked of her beforehand and edited the comment, which automatically unpins it. He also mentioned a friend couldn't see it, but they never sent screenshots as Anton had taken down the video while the friend was trying to watch it. This all could have been solved if Anton talked to Izzy, but he assumed the worst of her once again, another quite impulsive move on his part. With the defamation claim as well for another YouTuber, prison mate Luke, he left a comment on the video in question and apparently tried to contact Luke, but he never responded. If he did respond, do you think Anton would have let him keep the video up if he made corrections in the comments? Most likely not, since he struck down Izzy's video after she did just that and made a mistake due to his own orders. When he has an idea of someone, he sticks with it and doesn't ever question why something may have happened. In DMs, he showed me another DM set where he called Izzy a lying bitch, so I guess that sums up how much their truce and friendship meant to him. It's all a theater for Anton to claim himself as a nearly million sub channel to be the victim because these channels make videos on him. By the way, Anton, if you want to try and false take down this video too, go ahead. That'll be just enough false strikes for YouTube to have the grounds to suspend your account. Maybe don't be so impulsive and think for a moment. It's sad as well that he impulsively thought his audience would even care about the drama to begin with. A good majority of Antoons' YouTube audience doesn't care about the drama in the slightest. This is all Twitter beef that Anton himself mentioned he didn't want crossing over to his mostly PC channel, but I guess he changed his mind. I asked Anton about the switch, and he said he did it because Daft brought attention to his Twitter in the video, so he thought he could just combine the two. The downfall comes when you understand his audience didn't care about the drama, and by bringing it to their attention, he's either alienating people that wanted to watch more deathbed videos, or he's bringing drama to people's attention that they didn't know about before, and it could cause them to unsubscribe. I don't think the latter will really occur, however, because to get controversial with your audience, you need to have them see it first. As of script writing, the video barely has any views compared to his other works, whereas my video has gotten over 63k. For comparison here, Anton has a subscriber base of around 11.9 times the size of mine. That clearly shows his audience doesn't care. If Anton wanted, he could have moved on from this or even just kept it on Twitter, and it wouldn't have affected his YouTube pretty much at all. This was another big point of Daft's video as well. I brought this all up to Anton in conversation, and he said to me, "That's not the case at all my commentary videos get low views," which is flat out not true. His other videos relating to animation have netted him views of 500 and 100k. The drama video did worse for a reason, and that's because his audience doesn't care. And looking back at his Twitter, it looks like Anton is gearing up to make another video on Daft. Jesus, Anton, how much more pathetic can you really get? Daft is making a review about someone else. Are you mad he moved on? In one of our conversations, I tried to explain to him that with each response he gives, he makes himself look weaker. He said he could prove that none of the videos on him had any credibility, so I asked him why he felt the need to respond and comment still if they were so outrageous. I wondered why he felt the need to simply retweet every video made on him, and though he wouldn't state it, I already knew. He states it's just because he finds it funny, but it's clear he's doing this to find validation, and I let him know that this makes him seem insecure in his own words and opinions, making him take even the smallest video to his supportive audience to gain their validation. Unfortunately for him, he didn't gain any more fans with the video on Daft, as it currently has a less than 50% like to dislike ratio. Overall, my point is that he handled the criticism against him poorly and unnecessarily. During the interview, I conveyed to Anton that there's always going to be people who disagree with you, and trying to respond to everything to correct their perception of you is in the end futile, as just as said in Daft's video, it doesn't matter how you present yourself privately, as what people see to base their opinion on you is the person you present yourself as publicly. The way Anton shows himself off is as a guy that fights with children online and accuses them of things with no evidence, feels a need to respond to everyone with witty comments to get validation from his audience, and tries to come off as someone that owns the libs and doesn't care about tracing, but then false copyright strikes other videos, animates teens shooting blood out, and so on. By the way, he made the copyright claim because it was easier than defamation, showing he doesn't really care about the reason as long as it gets the video down. Speaking of Daft's video, in a more recent conversation, I asked Anton what he actually thought the point of it was. Anton seemed to believe that Daft thought everyone else thought of him as a racist and tracer outside Twitter, which he never actually said. He outright states he didn't understand the phrase, "I wouldn't put it past people," meaning he didn't fully grasp the video. I explained to him what it meant, and that's why Daft said he wanted Anton to look at the comments and such, because a lot of people understood where he was coming from and felt sympathy towards him. Unfortunately, as stated to him previously, he, instead of talking to Daft, made a tweet and looked like he was diverting from the criticism towards him, thus making himself look bad. I would compare the way he handled criticism to that of Fox Goodman. For those who don't know, Fox Goodman was a previous subject of one of Daft's videos. Like Antoons, he was a tracer. Near the end of Daft and Antoons' DMs, he tries to tell Anton that a lot of the comments under the video aren't as bad as he thinks, and that many people understand his plight and just want him to improve, but Anton wasn't really listening. I brought it back up to him, and that he could have resolved everything by taking it in stride and even gaining new fans in the process, but starting with his first tweet after stopping his talks with Daft, he had already started to make it so he couldn't recover. Just like Fox, Anton could have come off as mature by making a single response on Twitter or just improving without even mentioning it. But instead, he continued making tweets about Daft and Meat Canyon, trying to make them look worse without addressing his own issues, and then he posted the animation of Puppy Chan. This can be compared to how Fox asked people for $100,000 simply to try and get a response from Daft in some manner because it gave him attention. Fox could have been liked if he checked his ego and tried to improve, or just stopped tracing and took what Daft said, but he didn't do that. By his own choice, he ruined any chance of redemption, and looking at his channel now, he still gets dislike bombed. Anton did a similar thing by, instead of continuing his talks with Daft, as he had to go to sleep at the time, going on Twitter and tagging Meat Canyon and Daft instead. That's right, the whole reason Anton made a tweet about Daft was because he was sleeping. What? Really, Anton, you couldn't have waited and your ego was too big to handle? I spoke with Anton about this, and he mentioned that Daft was unwilling to talk as he closed his DMs. I brought this up to Daft, and he said he gave Anton a week, noting that he tweeted first before talking to him. When he didn't get a response for a while via Discord, Daft just blocked him, noting that it was no use to wait if he didn't want to solve anything. Also, the tweet about Daft and Meat Canyon was sent out after their last conversation, where Daft said he had to go to sleep. I asked Anton why he felt the need to take it public when he could have sent the same message to Daft privately and just waited for him to respond, and for a while, Anton tried to act like it was only pointed at Meat Canyon. He kept saying he just wanted Meat Canyon to respond, despite adding Daft twice in the thread. I asked him why he didn't try to talk to Daft while DMs were open, and he just replied saying, because he was sleeping. I mentioned to him that he had a week to respond, and it looked like he was just too impatient to wait for it, and decided to take it public for no reason instead. Anton then replied, he said he will talk to me in the morning, but he never did anything. And you have to think here. He tried to make Daft look like a hypocrite with this thread by mentioning Meat Canyon when Daft didn't mention the few tracings Meat, or more likely his assistants, did in his review. So basically, Anton decided to, for no real reason beyond getting public support, bring this up to people instead of Daft privately when he could have, making Daft look worse in the process. And then he expected a response afterwards. Does it not seem like there's anything wrong with that? Pissing in someone's yard and then wanting them to start the conversation with you? His excuse for not waiting was that he had work that day. Very impatient. Though, in another conversation, he sent me a message and waited for me to respond when I woke up, so I guess he's learning. Or maybe he just did that because his Twitter got suspended, who can say? Eventually, after moving to another question, I went back to saying he shouldn't have made the tweet for the reasons I've established many times at this point, and he tells me,
Okay, so you're saying Daft felt scared to respond in public, so he just decided not to talk to me again, and make a bunch of statements without asking me even in the public? That is beyond pathetic.
Remember when I said before that he tries to do power moves to make himself look better, and how the moment you disagree with him he calls you a liar and a loser? Yeah, it's here again. Also, briefly mentioning his suspension again, I asked him if he was going to come back to Twitter, breaching the TOS, and he said he would be fine not having it back, yet at the same time, he had already made a new Twitter which he was tweeting on. So not only did he try to dodge my incredibly direct question, but he also lied by implying that he was not going to come back. Something I'm pretty sure of is that he may not get this far in the video, and if he does, I believe he'll just call me a dumb minor who can't understand his reasons for doing things, but I suppose he'd just be repeating himself at this point. I keep mentioning the fact that I'm a minor, as during our talks Anton sent me porn to prove a point of his. Keeping in mind I never asked to see it and that he acknowledged my age multiple times, I wonder why people think he might be a map, as what he did was highly illegal. So speaking on the context here, he said that he was friends with this person that he called the T-slur called Squirrely Jack. I talked to Squirrely and they said that they were never friends of his but instead a target, and he said that they had a love-hate relationship because Squirrely drew him fan art, and it wasn't fan art, it was porn. That was clearly mocking him. Here is a safe for work image that shows that he is clearly being mocked here, and it's kinda just sad that he thinks that this meant that they were actually friends. Also, pretty big leap in logic to see that someone is mocking you and thinking that then you can call them the T-slur and they won't even mind. Another thing to mention is that throughout our conversations, he continually berated me and eventually asked me to make a video so everyone can move on. This is another one of his tactics, where he tries to show dominance by making the other person apologize when he thinks he has the upper hand. I avoided it, but this isn't his first time trying to pull this kind of fast move. In fact, the reason he accepted the interview with Daft in the first place was that Anton thought he would make everyone move on. Now Antoons just argues about Daft on Twitter, digging up as much evidence to prove Daft is a mean old guy from stuff he did as a teen. In summary, after seeing all these bits and pieces of information about Anton thrown around and seeing how he acts, and then getting to talk to him myself, all I was able to confirm is that he is an awful person through and through. What do I mean by this? Well, he sent unsolicited porn to a minor, me, age 16. He spent a long period of time working on an animation where, while censored, a minor shoots blood from their genitals, he calls people slurs of all kinds, he falsely takes down videos criticizing him because of his ego, he broke Twitter terms of service and is back pretending to be trans, he constantly tries to downplay his actions, is impatient, feels like he needs other people to justify his own actions because if they do, I can do it too. He falsely accuses people of being maps, leaves himself out of context to make himself look better, constantly brought up my age to condescend to me, he's actually quite sensitive about what other people have to say based on his interactions, and I got in contact with Borby, known for his OC Mr. Baghead, who told me about how Anton challenged several people to fistfights over Twitter, so there's that too. Elaborating a little further on the entire trans debacle, on Antoons' new Twitter, he's claiming to be trans, but he's also claiming to be transracial, supporting ACAB, and also supporting BLM, things that he has shown before to not actually support. He also put LGBTQ and a bunch of other random letters in there, plus he's tweeting constantly about being misgendered and such, so it all seems very parody-esque, but when I asked him on Discord if he was being genuine here, he said he was being completely serious. When I cast a shadow of doubt on his claims, he said, "Are you saying trans people cannot make fun of SJW? That's a bit discriminatory." And he also said, "Are you invalidating my experience?" These are the kind of things that he would make fun of only a few days ago on his Twitter before it got suspended. It does seem a little bit suspicious that he only started doing this after he got his new Twitter. Remember, this is the person who would actively use the T-slur out in public. This is the person who would constantly joke about trans suicide rates. This is the person who would constantly praise Kiwi Farms, which is known for being pretty transphobic. This is the person that only a few days before the statement said that he thinks that a lot of trans women only do it for attention. What I'm saying is the most likely scenario is that Anton is specifically doing this because he thinks it's funny or because he was egged on by other people in his circle, and with them breaching the terms of service by coming back to Twitter in the first place, they probably want to rebrand themselves and make themselves look like a completely different person so they don't have as many eyes on them. And what better way to do that than by claiming to be trans and trying to get sympathy out of people who don't know better? There is a very, very incredibly tiny, minuscule chance that this is actually genuine and we're looking at a Chris Chan situation here, but Chris Chan's scenario is incredibly specific, so I'd say it's highly unlikely. I myself remember when Anton created his first comic, which was about capitalizing off of people's own ignorance, so who's to say he isn't just following this same comic and trying to get people's sympathy so that he can come back on Twitter and act like nothing ever happened. As a final note, Anton also allowed me, a person they've only spoken to a few times, be able to use their original personal pronouns and names, so take that as you will. So yeah, overall, Antoons is kind of an awful person, and I look forward to his tweets calling me a dumb minor trying to search my past for anything to make me look bad. Anton, you're a sad 31-year-old man. Grow up and shut up. Make the stuff people actually want your traced animations. But hey, you contacted me first, so I guess that means I win. See y'all later. Goodbye. Oh, by the way, before this video was released, Anton had been constantly wanting to see it before release, and when he tried to bring up all the points we had talked about in conversation, it seems like he didn't actually change his opinion about anything whatsoever despite all of the points that I had brought up, and it seems like he still doesn't quite understand Daft's video, so yeah, there's that as well. Okay, goodbye, see y'all later, goodbye.